The gift sat exactly where they'd left it, a bright red box with silver ribbon, untouched for a full year. David's fingers hovered over it, afraid to lift what his son never got to open. The attic smelled of dust and forgotten things. David hadn't meant to come up here today, but the leak in the ceiling had forced his hand. Now he stood frozen before the single item that didn't belong among the Christmas decorations and old textbooks. A perfectly wrapped birthday present, the ribbon still crisp, the tag reading, "To Noah, love Dad," in his own handwriting. Downstairs, the grandfather clock struck 3. 1 year ago to the minute when the hospital had called. A floorboard creaked behind him. "You shouldn't be up here." David turned to see his ex-wife Rachel in the doorway, her arms crossed tight against her chest like she was holding herself together. She hadn't stepped foot in this house since the funeral. "I was fixing the leak," he said, but they both knew that wasn't why her gaze kept darting to the gift. Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. "We agreed to leave it." David looked back at the box. They'd chosen it together, a beginner's magic kit for Noah's 8th birthday. The party hats had still been on the table when the police arrived. A strange sound came from the box. Not a creak or settling noise. A tap. Rachel's breath caught. "Did you hear?" Another tap. Sharper this time. David reached out, his hand trembling. Rachel lunged forward and grabbed his wrist. "Don't." "What if?" The ribbon unraveled on its own, slithering to the floor like a silver snake. David's breath caught in his throat as the silver ribbon pulled at his feet. The air in the attic grew heavier, pressing down on them like a physical weight. The gift box, once perfectly wrapped, now sat exposed, its red surface dull under the flickering attic light. Rachel's grip on his wrist tightened. "This isn't possible." Another tap came from inside the box. David pulled free and reached for the lid. His fingers barely grazed the cardboard when the entire box jerked violently, sliding an inch across the floorboards as if something inside had shifted. Rachel gasped and stumbled back, her shoulder knocking into an old dresser. A framed photo of Noah clattered to the ground, the glass cracking diagonally across their son's smiling face. David didn't move. He stared at the box, his pulse hammering in his temples. A year of grief had hollowed him out, but now, something else filled that emptiness, something cold and electric. "David," Rachel whispered, "we should call someone." "Call who?" His voice came out rough. "And tell them what?" The box trembled again, more insistently this time. Then, faintly, a sound. Not a tap, a scratch, like fingernails dragging along cardboard. Rachel made a choked noise. "That's not." The scratching grew louder, more deliberate. Then, a voice. Faint, muffled, but unmistakably a child's. Asterisk, "Dad." Asterisk. David's knees nearly gave out. He knew that voice. Knew it in the way a father knows his child's laughter, his cries, his whispers in the dark. Noah's voice. Rachel let out a sob. "No, no, this isn't real." The scratching stopped. The box went still. Then, clear as day, the voice came again. "Asterisk, you forgot about me." Asterisk. David lunged forward and tore open the box. The magic kit lay untouched. The wand, the colored scarves, the deck of trick cards. All pristine, exactly as they had been the day they'd bought it. No scratches, no signs of movement. But nestled between the wand and the instruction manual was something that hadn't been there before. A small, folded piece of paper. David's hands shook as he picked it up. The paper was cold, unnaturally so, and slightly damp, like morning dew. He unfolded it. A child's handwriting. Noah's handwriting. Asterisk, "You were supposed to watch me." Asterisk. Rachel grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. "What does it say?" David couldn't speak. He turned the paper over. More writing. Asterisk, "The man in the road took me. You were looking at your phone." Asterisk. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. The accident. Noah had been riding his bike. David had been standing on the sidewalk, scrolling through emails. He'd looked up just in time to see the car swerve, just in time to hear the screech of brakes, the sickening thud. But he'd never told anyone he'd been distracted. Not even Rachel. She was staring at him now, her face pale. "David, what is that?" A drop of water hit the paper. Then another. The attic wasn't leaking. The words on the page were melting. Ink bled into the paper, reforming into new letters, new sentences. Asterisk, "You can fix it." Asterisk. Asterisk, "Come find me." Asterisk. Then an address. One David recognized. The intersection where Noah had died. Rain slashed against the windshield as David sped through the empty streets. Rachel sat rigid in the passenger seat, the magic kit clutched in her lap. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the house. David's mind raced. The handwriting, the words, the things Noah couldn't have known. Unless it really was him. Unless he was still somewhere. The traffic light at the intersection was out, swinging wildly in the storm. David pulled over, the tires crunching on gravel. The street was deserted. No cars. No pedestrians. Just the flickering glow of a dying streetlight. Rachel finally spoke. "This is where it happened." David nodded. He could still see it. The bike lying twisted in the road. The paramedics blocking his view. Rachel's screams when they told her. A gust of wind rocked the car. Then, a knock on the window. Rachel screamed. A small figure stood outside David's door, barely visible through the rain. A boy in a soaked yellow raincoat. Noah's raincoat. David's heart stopped. The boy lifted his head. The streetlight flickered again. For one terrible second, David saw his son's face. Then darkness. When the light returned, the road was empty. But on the windshield, written in the rain, "Follow me." David threw open the car door and stumbled into the storm. Rachel called after him, but her voice was swallowed by the wind. The raincoat flickered ahead, darting between patches of shadow. David ran, his shoes slipping on wet pavement. "Noah." The boy turned a corner into an alley. David followed, skidding to a stop. The alley was a dead end. Empty, except for a single object lying in the center of the pavement. Noah's bike. Not broken, not rusted. Pristine, as if it had just been left there. David reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the handlebars, the world tilted. The rain stopped. The alley vanished. And suddenly, he was standing on the sidewalk a year ago, watching Noah pedal toward the intersection, laughing over his shoulder. "Watch this, Dad." David tried to move, tried to scream, but he was frozen. A spectator in his own memory. He saw himself look down at his phone. Saw the car swerve. Saw Noah glance back, not at the road, but at him. At his father, who wasn't watching. The impact. The scream. Then, a hand on his shoulder. David spun around. Rachel stood there, her face streaked with tears. But it wasn't the Rachel from the car. This Rachel wore the same clothes she'd worn the day of the accident. And in her arms, she cradled the red gift box. "You were supposed to watch him," she whispered. The box opened on its own. Inside, where the magic kit should have been, lay a single playing card. The ace of spades. Noah's favorite. The card twitched, then flipped over. On the back, in fresh ink. "One last trick." The ace of spades lay perfectly still in the box, its edges unnaturally sharp against the faded red cardboard. David reached for it with trembling fingers, half expecting it to dissolve like the writing had. The moment his skin touched the card's surface, a jolt ran up his arm. Not pain exactly, but the electric tingle of static shock mixed with something deeper, something alive. Rachel's breath came in short, panicked bursts beside him. "This isn't happening," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "We're asleep. We're both asleep, and this is some shared nightmare." The card grew warm in David's hand. The ink on its back began to bleed outward in thin black tendrils, creeping across his fingers like vines. He tried to drop it, but his muscles refused to obey. The ink spread up his wrist, forming words against his skin. "Every magic trick has 3 parts." Rachel grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. "What is that? What does that mean?" Before David could answer, the alleyway around them rippled like disturbed water. The brick walls dissolved into streaks of color, the ground beneath their feet turning liquid. David felt himself falling. But there was no impact, just a sudden, sickening lurch as the world reassembled itself. They stood in their living room. Not the empty, grief-stricken space of the present, but the vibrant home of a year ago. Birthday decorations hung from the ceiling. A half-eaten cake sat on the coffee table. And there, by the window, stood Noah, alive, whole, grinning as he practiced sleight of hand with his new cards. "Watch this," the boy exclaimed, holding up the ace of spades. "I'm gonna make it disappear." David's knees buckled. He reached out instinctively, but his hand passed through Noah's shoulder like mist. "We're not really here," he realized aloud. "This is a memory?" Rachel made a choked sound beside him. She was staring past Noah, through the window. David followed her gaze and saw what had caught her attention, their past selves in the driveway. Memory David was loading presents into the car, while Memory Rachel scrolled through her phone. Noah's smile faltered as he watched them through the glass. They never look, he murmured to no one in particular. Then louder, hey, watch this. Neither parent glanced up from their tasks. The scene froze. The colors drained from the world, leaving everything in shades of gray except Noah, who turned slowly to face them. His eyes were different now, older, sadder. Too knowing for an 8-year-old. The first part is called The Pledge, Noah said, his voice layered with something deeper beneath, where the magician shows you something ordinary. The living room dissolved again. Now they stood at the intersection, watching the accident unfold in horrifying slow motion. David saw himself finally look up from his phone, his expression morphing from distraction to horror as the car careened toward Noah. The second part is the turn. Noah's voice echoed around them as the screech of brakes filled the air, where the ordinary becomes extraordinary. The collision never came. Instead, at the moment of impact, everything inverted, the car folding in on itself, the streetlights bending like rubber, Noah's body fragmenting into 1,000 shards of light that hung suspended in the air. David fell to his knees, a scream building in his throat. Rachel clutched at his shoulders, her entire body shaking. The shards of light began to rotate, forming a swirling vortex above the intersection. And the third part, Noah whispered directly into David's ear though the boy hadn't moved, is the prestige, where the impossible happens. The vortex exploded outward. David threw up his arms instinctively, but instead of shards of glass or light, what rained down were playing cards, hundreds of them, all ace of spades, each one landing perfectly face-up on the asphalt around them. When the last card fell, silence descended. The intersection was empty again. No car, no broken bike, just the empty road and the faint smell of ozone. Rachel was the first to move, picking up one of the cards with trembling fingers. There's writing, she said hoarsely. David took it from her. The same message appeared on every card. Come home. Their house keys materialized in their hands, warm as if just used. The front door key on David's ring was slightly bent, just like he'd left it after forcing the lock last winter when he'd forgotten his keys. Rachel met his eyes, her expression equal parts terror and desperate hope. Do we go? Before David could answer, his phone buzzed. An unknown number had sent a single image, the red gift box, sitting on their kitchen table. The timestamp showed the photo had been taken 3 minutes ago. Their house had been empty when they left. David's mouth went dry. He looked back toward their car, parked haphazardly at the curb. The driver's side door hung open, the interior light casting a sickly yellow glow across the seats. Something moved in that glow, a brief flicker of yellow fabric in the back seat. Noah's raincoat. Rachel saw it too. She made a small, broken sound and started toward the car. David caught her arm. Wait, he said, though every fiber of his being screamed to run to that back seat, to see if somehow, impossibly, the car door slammed shut on its own. The locks engaged with a series of sharp clicks. Then, slowly, the vehicle began to roll forward. No engine noise, no lights, just smooth, silent movement down the empty street. Toward their home. Rachel's grip on David's hand became crushing. He's leading us back, she whispered. The car picked up speed. David watched until it turned the corner and disappeared from view. Then, with a shared look of terrified determination, they began to walk. The streets were unnaturally quiet. No birds, no distant traffic, just the sound of their footsteps and the occasional rustle of playing cards skittering across the pavement in a wind they couldn't feel. As they turned onto their block, David noticed the lights were on in their house, every window blazing against the twilight. They never left lights on anymore. Couldn't stand the way it made the empty rooms look even emptier. The front door stood slightly ajar. From inside came the faint, unmistakable sound of a child's laughter. Rachel broke into a run. David followed, his heart hammering against his ribs. They burst through the door together, stumbling into the foyer. The house was transformed. Balloons floated near the ceiling. Streamers crisscrossed the hallway. And there, in the living room, sat the red gift box, now perfectly rewrapped with fresh silver ribbon. On the coffee table beside it sat two things, Noah's favorite juice box, half finished, just like he'd left it, and a Polaroid photo David had never seen before. He picked it up with shaking hands. The image showed Noah standing between him and Rachel, all three of them grinning at some unseen camera. Noah held up the magic kit proudly. The date stamp in the corner showed today's date. Rachel made a small, wounded sound. We didn't. From upstairs came the creak of floorboards. Then a voice, impossibly familiar, impossibly dear. Mom? Dad? Are you watching? The lights flickered. The temperature dropped. And in the sudden silence that followed, the gift box began to shake violently, its silver ribbon unspooling in slow, deliberate coils. The silver ribbon slithered to the floor like a living thing, coiling around itself in perfect loops. David couldn't move, couldn't breathe, his entire body locked in terrified anticipation as the gift box lid began to lift on its own. A sliver of darkness gaped between the box and its lid, deeper than the interior should allow, swallowing the light from the room. Rachel made a choked sound and grabbed David's arm. Her fingers felt like ice. Do you see? The lid flew open. No explosion. No burst of light. Just a perfect, absolute stillness as the contents were revealed. The magic kit sat exactly as it had before, but the wand now lay broken in two pieces across the top. The instruction manual was open to a page titled The Vanishing Act, the illustration showing a smiling magician making a child disappear. From upstairs came the sound of small, bare feet padding across hardwood. A giggle floated down the staircase, followed by the creak of the third step, the one that always groaned under Noah's weight when he snuck downstairs for midnight snacks. Rachel's breath came in short, panicked bursts. That's not possible, she whispered. That's not. The lights dimmed. The birthday candles on the cake, the same half-eaten cake from the memory, suddenly reignited, their flames burning an unnatural blue. Shadows stretched long across the walls, twisting into shapes that almost resembled grasping hands. David took an involuntary step forward, his shoes crunching on something. He looked down to find the floor littered with playing cards, all face down except one, the ace of spades, directly beneath his foot. When he lifted his shoe, the card stuck to it briefly before peeling away, leaving behind a sticky red residue that smelled faintly of copper. Oh God, Rachel moaned, pressing a hand to her mouth. David, is that? The giggle came again, closer now. From the hallway, right behind them. They turned together, so fast David nearly lost his balance. The hallway stood empty, but the family photo hanging on the wall, the one taken at Noah's 7th birthday, now showed only David and Rachel standing alone, their arms positioned as if holding an invisible child between them. The glass over the photo had cracked in a spiderweb pattern, radiating outward from where Noah's face should have been. A cold draft swept through the house, carrying with it the scent of rain and something else, something earthy and damp, like freshly turned soil. The candles flickered wildly, their blue flames stretching impossibly tall before snapping back to normal. Then, from the kitchen, the distinct sound of the refrigerator opening, the rattle of a juice box being taken out, the familiar slurping sound Noah always made when he drank too fast. Rachel moved first, stumbling toward the kitchen with desperate, clumsy steps. David followed, his legs heavy as lead. They reached the doorway just in time to see the juice box float midair, its straw bending at an angle as if being sucked by invisible lips. Then it dropped to the counter with a wet plop, landing exactly where Noah always left his unfinished drinks. The back door swung open with a bang, revealing the darkened yard beyond. The swing set they'd never taken down moved gently in the non-existent wind, its chains creaking in a familiar rhythm. Back and forth, as if someone had just jumped off. Rachel made a wounded animal sound and clutched at David's shirt. He's here, she gasped. He's really. The kitchen lights exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging them into near darkness. Only the eerie blue candlelight remained, casting long, dancing shadows. In that flickering glow, something moved by the back door, a small, indistinct shape darting past the threshold into the yard. David didn't think. He ran, bursting out into the cool night air just in time to see the swing set moving violently, as if caught in a storm. The grass beneath it was wet, not with rain, but with something thicker that clung to his shoes as he approached. Noah, he called, his voice breaking. Son, if that's you. The swing stilled instantly. The yard fell silent. The only sound was Rachel's ragged breathing as she joined him on the porch step. Then, from the trees at the edge of their property, a whisper. You weren't watching. David's blood turned to ice. That wasn't Noah's voice. Not entirely. It was layered with something else, something older and rougher, like multiple voices speaking at once. Rachel must have heard it too. She stiffened beside him, her fingers digging into his arm hard enough to bruise. Something's wrong, she whispered. That's not just Noah. The trees rustled despite the still air. A shape moved among them, too tall to be a child, but hunched over in an unnatural posture. It stepped forward into the dim moonlight, and David's stomach lurched. It wore Noah's clothes, the bright yellow raincoat, the dinosaur pajama pants he'd loved, but the proportions were all wrong. The arms too long, the legs bending backward at the knees. The face. God, the face was a blurred, shifting mess, like a poorly tuned television screen flickering between channels. Rachel screamed. The thing cocked its head at the sound, the movement too sharp, too avian. When it spoke, its mouth didn't move in sync with the words. You weren't watching when it mattered. Now you'll never stop watching. The back door slammed shut behind them with enough force to rattle the windows. The candlelight inside flared bright blue, then extinguished completely, plunging the yard into near darkness. Only the moon remained, casting sickly silver light over the nightmare before them. The thing that wasn't Noah took another jerky step forward. Its fingers, too many fingers, twitched at its sides. You get one chance, it said in that horrible layered voice. One trick to make things right. David found his voice, though it came out strangled and thin. What do you want? The thing smiled, its mouth stretching far too wide. The prestige, it whispered. Then it lunged. Rachel's scream was cut short as the world inverted. The ground fell away. The stars spun overhead. David felt himself tumbling through empty space, the thing's laughter echoing all around him, growing deeper, louder, until it wasn't laughter at all but the screech of brakes, the scream of metal, the sickening thud he'd heard 1,000 times in his nightmares. Then, impact. David gasped as solid ground rushed up to meet him. He was on his knees on hard pavement, rain pelting his back. Headlights blinded him. A car horn blared. And there, frozen in the beams, was Noah, alive, whole, his face a mask of confusion as he turned his bike toward the sound. Time slowed to a crawl. David knew this moment, knew it in his bones. He was back, really back, 1 year ago to the second it all went wrong. The car swerved. Noah looked over his shoulder, not at the vehicle bearing down on him, but directly at David, his eyes wide with recognition. Dad, he mouthed. The choice came with perfect, terrible clarity. David could stay frozen, let history repeat itself. Or he could do what he'd failed to do before. He moved. His body screamed in protest as he launched forward, muscles burning with effort he hadn't exerted in years. The world narrowed to the space between him and Noah, the distance closing with agonizing slowness. The car's brakes screeched. Rachel screamed his name from somewhere behind him. David's fingers brushed the back of Noah's shirt just as the bumper made contact. Then, blackness. Silence. A single playing card floating gently down through the void. The ace of spades. On its back, a single word glowed faintly in the dark. Prestige. The card flipped over. Light exploded outward. Sound rushed back in a dizzying wave. David found himself standing in his living room, the birthday decorations bright and cheerful around him. Noah's laughter rang out from the kitchen, followed by Rachel's amused scolding about eating cake before dinner. His hands shook as he looked down at himself. Normal clothes. No injuries. His phone sat silent in his pocket. From the kitchen doorway, Noah peered out, his face smeared with chocolate frosting. Dad, come see the trick I learned. David couldn't speak. He simply nodded and followed his son into the kitchen, where Rachel stood by the counter, whole and happy and alive. She smiled at him, a real smile, the kind he hadn't seen in years. Noah held up the ace of spades with a magician's flourish. Watch close, he instructed. This is the best part. He tossed the card into the air. It spun, glinting in the light, and for just an instant, David saw something reflected in its surface, the thing from the yard, its too wide smile, its many fingers pressed against some invisible barrier between worlds. Then the card landed neatly in Noah's palm, blank on both sides. "The end," Noah announced with a grin. Except David knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the core, that it wasn't. The card. The box. The unnatural thing wearing his son's face. This wasn't over. This had only just begun. From the corner of his eye, he saw the red gift box sitting on the counter, its silver ribbon twitching ever so slightly, as if stirred by a breeze that didn't exist. David stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, his son's laughter still ringing in his ears. The weight of what had happened, what might still be happening, pressed against his chest like a physical force. His fingers twitched at his sides, half expecting to find them stained with blood or ink or that strange red residue. But they were clean. Perfectly, impossibly clean. Rachel touched his arm, her fingers warm and real. "You okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing in that familiar way. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The gift box on the counter caught his eye again. The ribbon had gone still. Noah tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, you didn't watch my trick." His face was bright, alive, his eyes sparkling with the uncomplicated joy of childhood. David knelt suddenly, pulling his son into a crushing hug. He breathed in the scent of chocolate and shampoo and little boy sweat, memorizing the solid weight of him, the beating of his heart. Noah squirmed in his grasp, giggling. "Dad, too tight." He loosened his grip, but didn't let go completely. "Sorry, buddy. Just wanted to make sure you're real." Noah rolled his eyes with all the drama an 8-year-old could muster. "Duh." Then, with a sly grin, he produced the ace of spades from behind David's ear. "See? Magic." Rachel laughed, the sound light and carefree in a way David hadn't heard in years. She ruffled Noah's hair. "All right, magician. Go wash up for dinner." As Noah scampered off, David rose slowly to his feet. His eyes never left the gift box. Rachel followed his gaze, her expression softening. "You want to put that away before he sees it?" He reached for it, half expecting it to move, to whisper, to bleed ink. But it was just a box. Just cardboard and ribbon. He turned it over in his hands once before placing it carefully on the highest shelf in the pantry, behind the cereal boxes and pasta jars. When he turned back, Rachel was watching him, her head tilted. "You've been acting strange all day," she said quietly. "Like you're waiting for something bad to happen." David opened his mouth, then closed it. How could he explain? The accident. The box. The thing that wasn't Noah. The second chance he'd somehow been given. The cost he wasn't sure he'd finished paying. Instead, he pulled her close, pressing his face into her hair. "Just grateful," he murmured. "That's all." She hugged him back, her arms strong around him. "For what?" "For you. For Noah. For—" His voice broke. "Forgetting to watch." That night, after tucking Noah in, 3 extra hugs, 2 more bedtime stories than usual, David stood in the hallway, listening to his son's steady breathing. The house was quiet in a way that felt peaceful now, not empty. Safe. He checked the pantry before bed. The box was right where he'd left it. In their bedroom, Rachel was already asleep, her face smooth and untroubled in the moonlight. David climbed in beside her, his body finally relaxing into the mattress. Just before sleep took him, he thought he heard something. The faintest rustle of paper, the softest whisper of ribbon against cardboard. But when he lifted his head, the sound stopped. And in the morning, when he checked again, the box was gone. Asterisk if this story moved you. Please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of love, loss, and the moments that change us forever. Let us know in the comments. Would you have opened the box? Asterisk.